CF Benchmarks.
The very first xStocks billboard ever created was in Johannesburg. And we only found out about it because someone found it and took a picture for us. That's the kind of product that you want to be able to sell. One that's selling itself into new markets. So that billboard's all about bringing South Africans into equities in a way they hadn't before. And there was a local company that had built a crypto trading app and brought equities into it. And they thought that was exciting enough to put on billboards across South Africa. Those are the kind of products that have PMF, product market fit. And that's what we have here.
You're listening to CFB Talks Digital Assets, the home of informed conversation about crypto for institutions building the future of finance, brought to you by CF Benchmarks, the world's largest crypto index provider. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for another episode of CFB Talks Digital Assets. I'm Ken Odelega, Head of Content, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, Gabe Selby, who's Head of Research, and Mark Pilipchuk, who's our Research Analyst. Today, we are excited to be joined by Mark Greenberg, who is overseeing Kraken's xStocks amongst his ever-growing list of responsibilities. So Mark, thank you very, very much indeed for taking time out of your schedule to join us.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
And we are also joined by Thomas Erdösi, who is Head of Product and Director of CF Benchmarks. And he's also going to be helping us out to talk about xStocks. Thomas, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here.
So yes, indeed, today we are going to deal with this phenomenon of xStocks. And I think you'll agree that that word is actually justified because 25 billion in total transaction volume over an 8-month period is, of course, exponential. So we're obviously going to provide a great deal of detail in terms of how xStocks tick, but also we're going to look at potential institutional use cases as well. So to kick things off, let's basically start off with laying some groundwork about the basics of xStocks. Mark, let's start with you, Mark Greenberg, that is. We've got two Marks with us today. What do you see the general drive from consumers? We can name a number of things, obviously. So we're talking about non-US consumers only. But in terms of a non-US consumer in any country, let's say in Europe or maybe in Brazil or somewhere else, what are the kinds of pressures or the kinds of motivations that are driving these clients to look at a solution like tokenized equities, which is what xStocks are?
I think it's pretty interesting that for whatever reason, some of the things that we're used to in crypto trading, in Bitcoin trading, haven't really existed in equities. The fact that you can trade them 24/7, the fact that you can move them easily between venues and you don't have to work with one broker dealer forever, the fact that you can self-custody them, the fact that you can use them as collateral for loans, the fact that you can use them in all sorts of different DeFi things and earn yield. All of those things have existed on crypto assets now for years, and they haven't existed on equities. Equities traditionally sort of 24/5 now, not that great, even in portions of that for most equities. Really, really hard to move from one broker to another. Access is a pain. You need to KYC, you need to work with a broker dealer. I was in Brazil earlier this week talking with consumers there, and even people who have a decent amount of money and a decent net worth, it's really hard for them to buy US equities. As a Canadian, I still find it. So when I tried to move from one broker dealer to another here in Canada, it took 3 weeks, multiple faxes. I didn't even know faxes existed anymore. Multiple faxes occurred along the way. So those are some of the reasons. And yes, today, tokenized equity is not available in the United States. xStocks not available, but we're working really hard with the SEC and FINRA and other regulators around the world to bring xStocks to new markets. But at the end of the day, what is it mostly about? It's just your own control over your own assets, which is something that we've always thought was really important at Kraken and at Payward. And we're just lucky to be able to bring to more asset classes like equities now.
You mentioned Brazil, which is a brilliant example. Let's say you're someone you might have met while you were there, actually. They want to buy xStocks, or they just want to be involved in xStocks. I know there's a number of ways you can actually do that. Give me some high-level ways that someone in Brazil, say, maybe off the streets, maybe a little bit more sophisticated, maybe not so sophisticated, can actually get involved in xStocks?
Yeah, it's actually really easy. Go on Telegram, go on the Kraken app, push a few buttons and buy them. Like that's as simple as this gets. Telegram's probably the easiest way right now, or
Right.
Phantom Wallet, or any of many DeFi wallets out there. Go into that wallet the same way that you would go and buy your Bitcoin. You type in Tesla X or NVIDIA X or QQQX or any of these others, and trade. Either you buy it with your credit card, or with in Brazil you'd use Pix. Very, very easy that way, the same way that it would be for crypto assets. No need to go through a full broker dealer onboarding to a US broker dealer. No need to necessarily even use custody of a place like Kraken or otherwise. You just use your own non-custodial wallet and do it in a few clicks.
Yeah, that's an important distinction because it's like, although they are, of course, Kraken xStocks, you don't necessarily have to go through Kraken to experience xStocks. That's fair, right? Would
For
you
sure,
agree
there's
with? Yeah,
90,000, ninety four
yeah,
thousand when I last looked wallets holding xStocks today in the non-custodial environment. And then there's folks holding them on other competitors to Kraken, right? BitGet and Bybit and others also support xStocks. Actually, if you go on the Coinbase wallet, you can also buy xStocks. That's my favorite part about xStocks. They are designed to be infrastructure for everybody, for all sorts of different apps and experiences and folks around the world. They're not meant to be a Kraken product. That's why we have them as a Payward product, because they're actually not within the Kraken brand necessarily.
sure, sure, sure.
I wanted to jump in and just kind of highlight one thing. So if you look at stock market participation right now, we can compare these as like US and non-US. And when you compare it to like an emerging market specifically, stock market participation is much lower. It's somewhere between, according to my research, it's between like 5 to 15% of the adult population. Whereas in the US, it can range up to like 50 to 60%, let's just say. So do you see this type of access, this type of gateway as being a societal shift for really getting that kind of broader scope into these types of markets?
I hope so. And yeah, that's what we're aiming to do. It's funny because I think more people are buying Bitcoin in Brazil than buying equities at this moment. And part of the reason is it's just so much easier to do. Is that the right move for everybody who has $5 or $10 in their wallet? For some, absolutely it is. For some, hopefully at some point, a more diversified portfolio might make sense as well. And that's where making it easy for folks to invest in all the things they want to invest in is important, and why I'm excited about xStocks. We see that happening. The next step to a lot of this is now bringing different types of markets into the xStocks program. So right now we're talking mostly about US equities, but I look forward, part of the reason we were in Brazil and I was in Hong Kong a few weeks ago is thinking about bringing other stock exchanges and other types of equities into this as well. As a Canadian, actually, Americans sometimes don't notice how hard it is because it's actually relatively easy in the United States. But even in a market like Canada, where you think we would have good access, I tried to use my broker dealer not that long ago to buy a couple of European equities, and just couldn't. They were trying to use a market maker that didn't have access to the specific piece, and I was trying to use the US ADR, and all these things happened. Actually, one of them I managed to buy and then couldn't sell again, because by the time I went to go sell it, they actually had lost that specific route. These are the kind of things that a lot of, in the US, people take for granted that you can go and buy from any stock exchange, that you can go and do this easily, that you have so many options for modern broker dealers that you can use. There's actually nowhere else in the world where that's really true. And so that's a key part of making equities pervasive in more markets, a higher proportion of wealth for folks in emerging markets. It just comes from making it way easier for them to do the kind of things that Americans typically take for granted.
I want to now move towards how does it actually work? How do you actually manage to actually do this? I think that's a question that a lot of people may have in their mind. So we've got the experts in the room with us now, obviously Mark and also Thomas from the CF Benchmark side, because I think we may not have made clear CF Benchmarks is providing the pricing infrastructure for xStocks. So now I want to start off with you, Mark. So basically, when you look at your wallet or you look at your balance on your trading app, does that actually represent something in the market? Or because I know that x stocks are basically 100% collateralized, it means one to one. how does it actually work in practice? You're literally going out to buy an individual stock that if someone buys an X stock.
Yeah, exactly. So when you think about tokens, you think about minting them, creating a new one, and then burning them again. And those are the two actions that make new X stocks. When you mint a new X stock, that means somebody buys an X stock token, and we buy an underlying stock stored in an SPV, a special purpose vehicle in Jersey. Similarly, when we go to burn or reduce the number of X stocks out there, we do exactly the same thing on the other side, and we sell the underlying share. That means we're always one-to-one collateralized, and that's exactly what you need, because the X stock itself is a debt security that is an IOU for the dollar amount associated with that stock at that given point in time. So we always will commit, if you're holding an X stock, to give you back the dollar amount value of the underlying share in that moment. Lots of stuff going on behind the scenes to make that happen. We should go way deeper into it. That's, I think, part of the fun.
Are you able to kind of share a little bit about how xStocks is integrated? It's kind of like its structure versus maybe its competitors. Perhaps there's an advantage there with I think the integration of backed finance. Perhaps is that something that we've seen with the custodial features and how it's all kind of vertically integrated?
Yeah, oh, there's so many different ways to take that. Let's start with actually the simplest one, which feels like it should be easy, but it's actually really hard. We want to make sure one of the key features that we built into the way xStocks works is that one token of xStock is the same value as one share you would see in the market. That sounds easy, and like that should always be the case, but you have to take into account all of the corporate actions that occur. You have to take into account dividends. And when you look at some of the other tokens in the market, because of those types of corporate actions, because they haven't built it the way we have, they're actually moving out of sync with the underlying price. So the price of a token in their system might not actually match the price of a share anymore. How does that work? Well, we built our xStocks on something called rebasing tokens. Rebasing tokens allow us to automatically increase and shrink the number of token that you have. And so that allows us to handle a stock split, which would create—
I was going to say, it sounds like a stock split kind of.
Exactly. Or a dividend, because in a dividend, the way dividends work with xStocks is we basically use it to reinvest in the share. And so you get a little bit more of, say, Tesla X, not that Tesla is a dividend at the moment, but if it did, you would get a little bit more Tesla. Similarly, so there's a whole technical system in there that we actually had to re-architect some of the way Kraken worked in order to support it. And we made sure that that was the case because we want to make sure that this is easy for anyone, that you always know the right price of an X stock and you can compare it to the Tesla you hold in your Interactive Brokers or Kraken account or otherwise on the traditional side.
I could imagine it getting, well, it is complex, but I could imagine it getting really finicky. Can you short X stocks? Do you borrow to short? Because obviously we're talking, I'm comparing it to cash equities.
Yeah.
You can basically borrow cash equities to short them or, and other sort of like market operations.
So we have margin. We don't have shorts just yet on the Kraken side. We also have perps on NATO, which is an Inc. chain DEX that exists. We also have all sorts of things coming actually down the pipeline. So I think that's one of the most interesting things about xStocks. Because they're permissionless, most of what's being built on xStocks has nothing to do with us as the Kraken or xStocks team. Most of it is going to be built by others for their use cases. And so, yeah, can you borrow against xStocks? Can you borrow xStocks? Absolutely, you can. You can do that on Camino, on Aave, on other lending markets out there, Tidro on the Inc. chain. How you use them, totally up to you. You can use that as a shorting mechanism for sure. If you want, you can use that in other ways as well. So lots and lots of on-chain tools and systems out there to use xStocks. And I'm excited for the things nobody's built before on equities. Perps are a good example of that. Like perps have been such a big part of the crypto ecosystem. They haven't really made their way to equities. Well, now with xStocks, they can, and they have been. So lots of exciting stuff coming down the pipe on this.
With the perp stuff, maybe you can jump in, Thomas, and just kind of give us a broad overview of how CF Benchmarks is currently, tied to xStocks. How are we working with this groundbreaking kind of technology and tokenizing securities?
So CF Benchmark's primary role in this is to do what we do best. So we provide regulated indices, regulated benchmarks that track xStocks prices by effectively aggregating order book data across available spot markets. And that's, again, analogous to CFB's usual role as the world's first and largest crypto benchmark administrator. Now, there are a few intricacies related to xStocks that require us to go over and beyond what we usually do. There are two key areas. One is what Mark G already alluded to, basically the cross-exchange feed normalization. So different exchanges might handle things like corporate actions in a slightly different fashion, which then on our end requires handling or rebasing of multiplier adjustments to be able to basically aggregate these feeds and produce a clean benchmark that then everyone can use, for example, for Kraken Spot to power the spot markets, for the perp MTF to run the perp market. So that's an important one. And then obviously the next one is the whole corporate actions piece. So how do you deal with, let's say, a stock split for a perp market? And that's obviously non-trivial. And CFB has there developed a corporate actions data product. So it's basically a structured product feed providing historical and upcoming event data, and also actionable instructions that basically tell DEXers or perp market runners how to take into account these corporate actions to make sure these markets run as smoothly as possible. So that's in a nutshell CFB's involvement at this stage.
You mentioned the multiplier. Tell me, because we've already discussed how these are one-to-one, why would you need any sort of multiplier or intervening calculation to actually work out prices or volume or amounts or anything? If you can is there a way to actually render that for us simply?
Yeah, sure. So let's dive into it. Let's talk about raw balance and multipliers just for a second. So raw balance is effectively the fixed number of xStock based units recorded per wallet on chain. So that's the raw balance that you see. And this changes only, and that's very important, it changes only through explicit mint or burn or transfer transactions. Importantly, it does not change due to corporate actions. Now, the corporate actions piece is where the multiplier comes in. Right. So the final balance displayed to a holder is always raw balance multiplied by the multiplier. Now, what is the multiplier? The multiplier is, in essence, a cumulative scaling factor maintained by the issuer that maps this raw on-chain balance to a holder's actual economic exposure. Now, it starts at 1 at token launch, and it adjusts with every corporate action. So let's say a dividend issue, let's say a rights issue, a split, and that accumulates throughout the token's life. So let me give you an example. For example, so let's say a dividend moves the multiplier from 1 at inception to, let's say, 1.008. Dividends normally don't have such a big impact. But then subsequently, there is a 4-to-1 split, which then moves that multiplier to 4, which is slightly above 4. And that then has this downstream effect on the actual total balances that holders see. Again, calculated as a raw balance times multiplier. I hope that makes sense.
I think the more we can sort of like shine light on, how it actually works and why it's actually got a lot of veracity, it's all brilliant. It's all good. So thanks a lot for that.
One of the most amazing parts about xStocks is we are forging a brand new path, something that hasn't existed before. And so all of this had to be figured out from scratch. And Thomas and the whole team at CFB have been super, super helpful in helping us do that.
We appreciate that. Gabe and Mark P, do you any sort of things that arise from what we've just been discussing?
We should talk a little bit about xStocks growth over the last, it's been out around 8 months in now.
Yeah,
roughly.
The 25 billion.
Yeah, 25 billion in volume. Yeah.
Any product that would be just like, stonking, and it is stonking. But Mark G, tell me, this is the main burning question for me. Are you surprised? Is this what you expected, or what's your reaction basically?
If you were to ask me a year and a half ago what I thought about tokenized securities more generally, I would have told you I was pretty bearish. And the reason behind that was everything that existed at that time was super permissioned, very marketing oriented, and not really designed with the user in mind, really designed to, make a nice headline in a press release. And when we started talking about this topic for ourselves, we started from that permissionless 24/7 mindset. And we must have met 100 different teams who were working on different things. And, at some point my eyes were glazing over of like another one like this. And we want to do this. And when we met the back team and we started to understand what they were doing and how they had taken a really novel regulatory approach that would make these things permissionless and easy for users to use, we got really excited. And that was the moment at which I flipped from a real pessimist to someone who was all in. The rest is not that surprising to me. If you make things that are easy for folks to use, that are awesome investments for them, they will use it. And that's why we've seen the 150,000 users so far, 25, I think we're at 29 billion today, volume, and 100 plus partners with more being added every single day. So I feel like we're just scratching the surface of what xStocks will be in another 12 months. I'm looking forward to getting that number to 25 billion a day, more than just 25 billion so far, and feeling pretty good about that. I think we're well on track to make that a reality over the coming months.
It sounds like you're seeing signs of, unmet demand even still.
For sure. I
wow.
get excited. I don't know, maybe here's another xStocks story. The very first xStocks billboard ever created was in Johannesburg. And we only found out about it because someone found it and took a picture for us. That's the kind of product that you want to be able to sell. One that's selling itself into new markets. So that billboard's all about bringing South Africans into equities in a ways they hadn't before. And there was a local company that had built a crypto trading app and brought equities into it. And they thought that was exciting enough to put on billboards across South Africa. Those are the kind of products that have PMF, product market fit. And that's what we have here. And so the excitement, I think we're just getting started of people realizing what they can do with xStocks in their own apps, what they can do on chain with it, how they can use it as a collateral vehicle for all sorts of things they want to do, how they can use it to whatever 10x or 100x their leverage if they so desire. So all of these things are available with xStocks in a really fun way. And so I think just starting to see people really clue in.
Yeah. And you've talked a lot about how this is all in markets outside the US, and that's really where we've seen this come from so far. And we don't really have access yet in the US. Do you see the US as a big opportunity given that we have such an advanced brokerage system, or is it kind of more going to be a product that grows in other markets, do you think?
I see two values for the US. The first is we want to make sure that US companies, teams, projects can participate in bringing this asset class to the world. And so for us, that's actually the most important thing, right? So part of the reason you need access in the US is so that you can be market makers, DeFi creators, right? Like new app builders for the world. And it's really hard to do that from the United States if you don't have access to xStocks. So that's part one. And we just need to have that kind of access within the United States in order to be able to be that leader in tokenized equities. The second is I do see a decent amount of excitement for bringing collateral on chain and using it in new novel ways that may not exist in the traditional market. Is it a little bit different? Yeah, this isn't going to be the place you buy and hold probably $20 of, like your first $1,000 of Circle stock necessarily in the United States, because it is a lot easier to do it elsewhere. But for more sophisticated investors who want to try different things and want to use perps and want to borrow funds against their Circle, that's the kind of thing you can do much more easily on chain. And then you get to another category, which is, I hope we get to a point where you're not even sure you're using xStocks behind the scenes. And a lot of things just are easier because you're using permissionless tokens underneath. And that means the next generation of fintech apps in the United States, maybe they don't have to build all the traditional infrastructure that they used to before. Maybe they can actually build it a lot quicker. And so an app like Uber's app, could it have equities in it? Maybe, if you can make it a lot easier for them to do. So
I think there's something about the way that, there's obviously something about the way that we've actually operationalized this idea. I think something about Kraken has enabled some sort of synergy to bring about the results that we're seeing in terms of the transaction volume. Would you agree? And what would that be if put it down in some essence if you can?
yeah, so there's two parts to what makes xStocks. One hand, I've talked a lot about infrastructure. Hundreds of partners in the xStocks Alliance who are all building their own pieces on top of it and being able to do that in their own, decentralized and different ways. That works really well, but you have a cold start problem. It's really hard to get started if you just have a bunch of people who are all trying to get started at the same time. We're so lucky to also be able to distribute xStocks through Kraken. Kraken has many millions of users who we can very easily put xStocks in front of. It can become an easy on and off ramp and a mint burn source for users. It helps set a floor and a ceiling price. Because we can do the mint burn, we can be very clear about the price that you can get, and you'll always be guaranteed to be able to go back to Kraken and get that price. So the fact that we can be both vertical in building one distribution leg and also horizontal in building the infrastructure, I think is for sure a leg up for this specific product. But that being said, our goal is to make Kraken a very small distributor of xStocks. And so I look forward to bringing all of our competitors into xStocks, and we're working very closely to bring a few of them on, I hope, over the next coming months. And that's just about the fact that we believe this is infrastructure for the world, not just something we want to sell on Kraken.
Well, now might be a good time to bring up some of the recent headlines that we've seen. If you care to maybe just share a little bit of the backstory of how this partnership with the NASDAQ came to fruition, I think our audience would be very, very interested in hearing it from you. So yeah, for whatever you're comfortable with sharing, I think there's a lot to dive into there.
Let's talk about what it is first, and then we can go back and figure out how it came about. I think at its core, we've always sort of seen, on our side, we've always seen tokenized equities as having kind of a dual role. On one hand, you've got the permissioned worldwide model of xStocks, which is super easy for folks to use, easy for folks to build upon. But in addition to that, the traditional equity market, just the infrastructure behind it is just super broken, right? It doesn't work very well. It's very antiquated in approach. There are too many intermediaries and layers. And so we always recognized that there would be a permissioned US tokenized model that would help broker dealers, of which actually Kraken and my team is one, more easily move equities between firms, more easily settle, more easily operate, not necessarily need to use ACATs anymore. And so we've always been interested in trying to figure out how to be part of that permissioned US broker-dealer model as well. And in some early conversations with NASDAQ, we found that we were very aligned on that dual track model. They were excited about bringing NASDAQ issuers to more users around the world through an xStocks model. And they were also excited about bringing into the broker-dealer model more flexibility in the traditional model, working with issuers to offer 24/7 trading, offering new types of users access, offering new collateral and lending mechanisms. And so the appetite from both sides was extremely high right from the beginning. I think they were excited by what we were doing on the xStocks side, and we were excited to help them forge a path on the permission side. And we knew we wanted those to interoperate. And so it was a shockingly easy partnership. I've worked on lots of really hard partnerships where it takes a lot of energy from both sides. This just felt like a win-win from the start for all of us. And so we were just really excited to start to define the details and spending lots of time together right now, getting this from press release into execution over the coming months.
And that's actually slated for just over a year from now. My understanding is, Mark, first half of 2027. Is that correct?
I threw down the challenge that we're going to beat that time of the team.
Okay.
So I'm not committing.
So you're giving us a scoop here then. We're gonna try. We're gonna try and beat the time. Say the timeline.
Sounds a long way away. I thought.
No,
it sounds
that's
a
too
long way
far
away.
away.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it faster than that. Obviously, the Kraken Payward folks can be a little bit more pushy on timelines, and so we're gonna try and do this as fast as we can together. They're excited too. It's just it's a lot of work to build something that works in all of the traditional approaches and systems, and obviously couldn't think of a better partner than NASDAQ to help us build that together.
I was gonna say for the audience, maybe just briefly like highlight maybe what this is gonna look like in your eyes from pilot to when we get to that ultimate end goal.
Yeah, so NASDAQ's building what they're calling the NASDAQ equity tokens. Those will be issuer led. So they're going to go out to their issuers and other issuers and invite them to join. Those tokens will then be a full one-to-one representation of the underlying stock. So a little different than xStocks, which are debt securities and IOUs against the stock. These will be true representations of the underlying stock. And then the question is, what do you do with them and how do you trade them? We're working with NASDAQ on building a ATS. Kraken will manage the settlement, the funding and settlement to support trading on that ATS. And so 24/7 trading in the United States based on through Kraken Securities, which is our broker dealer, will be done by NASDAQ, but supported by us. And that's kind of V1. Make it really easy at that time to take that trading from the NASDAQ equity tokens and bridge back and forth between them and the xStocks so that you can take those tokens on chain and do whatever you want with them in the on-chain ecosystem. The next step is to bring that liquidity on chain and that settlement on chain. And that'll probably start with a set of other trusted settlement providers like settlement and funding providers like Kraken. So we'll bring in a number of other broker dealers and do some net settlement on chain. And then hopefully over time, get that N up from 1 to 5 to 50 to unlimited with further building out of the technical capability under the chain.
So you sparked so many questions. Obviously, I'm going to jump in there, Mark. So at the moment, and certainly at inception, from what you're saying, it sounds like we're talking about essentially two separate worlds. Kraken xStocks, as yet to be named NASDAQ tokenized equity, offering infrastructure powered by Kraken xStocks or Kraken, your technology, your team. The second stage, is that where all meets all, or are we still talking about two separate platforms here?
Let's see. I'm not sure yet, to be honest. We've worked hard to build a regulatory structure that works permissionless for xStocks. I would love if we can move that into a more traditional equity model in the United States. We're definitely not there yet from the rule set. And it's going to take some time, I think, before we won't need both sort of dual classes of tokenized equity. We're definitely building the infrastructure so that it can operate that way. And frankly, these new NASDAQ equity tokens will act as because they represent the shares, they'll be the underlying for xStocks. And so you'll be able to easily move them into xStocks and move them out the same way you would wrap a token when you move it across chains today. Will we get to a place where you don't need to do that wrapping? Maybe. I hope so. That's part for us to explore together between NASDAQ and ourselves. But on day one, probably still some wrapping and unwrapping to be done.
That obviously leads, very neatly to that rule set, the regs, Mark. How is it looking in terms of that future we get to, whereby it won't just be persons outside the United States who can participate in xStocks? Are we anywhere near that?
Absolutely, we are. So one of the best things about xStocks is when we launched it, regulators around the world came knocking on our door and said, hey, how do we bring this into our markets? We've been talking to the regulators in Canada, in the UK, in Australia, and in the United States to bring xStocks into those markets. I'd say we've had a very active and thoughtful discussion with our partners in all of those markets on bringing them into the US and Canada, UK. None of those discussions are done yet. So I won't count the chicken before it's hatched, but I feel very, very optimistic we'll be bringing xStocks into more of those markets over the coming months.
2 days ago, I believe the SEC approved the Nasdaq's proposal to allow tokenized securities to trade alongside their traditional shares. So that's going to allow, I think, same price, same ticker, as long as it has the same QSIP. How does this regulatory development kind of help speed up things here in the US, or even does it also kind of impact things abroad? Because does the Nasdaq essentially become like the de facto, tokenized security exchange now with all these advancements that the SEC is green lighting into the space?
Not sure. So I think this is it's a big win, but it's a relatively narrow win, and it supports the Nasdaq equity tokens, which will allow them to trade on their exchange alongside the traditional forms. So that's exactly what we're talking about through this ATS right now, and exactly what we're working towards. Glad to see the SEC give the thumbs up on it. I think that helps us accelerate the timeline on launching those in market, but lots more to figure out still. So I'd say this is still early days on US access to both permissioned and permissionless, but lots more coming in the next few months.
So yeah, let's talk about what's on your horizon in terms of xStocks or anything related to it. What are you most excited about that's it's in the pipeline that you can maybe air for us right now?
Yeah, so in addition to more access to xStocks, we're really excited about adding a lot more xStocks in. We're at about 100 today. I hope we'll be at 10,000, including equities from many more markets. So not just US equities, Hong Kong and Chinese and UK and Europe and Brazilian equities in the program. I also am pretty excited about yield. So working right now to bring yield on chain for xStocks. So in addition to making money off the dividends, if you're willing to put your assets into a lending pool, you can earn another 1, 2, 3, 5% on top of your assets. So those are just some of the things I'm excited about. I'm just also excited to bring a lot more partners into xStocks over the coming months and years. And so let's just keep growing this thing. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. We really appreciate you coming to explain about those xStocks. And Thomas, thanks a lot for jumping on as well to give us the mechanics and the architecture of the pricing. So guys, I hope you enjoyed hearing about Kraken xStocks as much as we did. Mark Greenberg is an amazing guest, knowledgeable, and also very, very easy to listen to. And also, of course, on the CF Benchmark side, Thomas Erdösi, Head of Product. Thank you very much indeed for the information about how the pricing, which sounds quite complex, but you actually made it sound quite simple. So appreciate that as well. If you enjoyed the conversation, we are now in our 50s in terms of the episodes that we've done of these CFB Talks Digital Assets. Go to your favorite platform. You can find all of the previous episodes. For the rest of our content, cfbenchmarks.com is where you need to go. After you've done all that, we'll see you again for another episode of CFB Talks Digital Assets. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to CFB Talks Digital Assets. This recording is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. This recording is not intended to persuade or incite you to buy or sell any financial products noted within, including but not limited to exchange-traded funds, mutual funds, equities, other instruments that reference any index provided by CF Benchmarks Limited, or crypto assets. Any commentary, interviews, and discussions are opinions only and should not be considered a personalized recommendation. Please contact your financial advisor or professional before making an investment decision. Note, some of the underlying instruments cited within this recording may be restricted to certain customer categories in certain jurisdictions.